The story opens in a village shrouded in mist, a place forgotten by time and heavy with silence. The air carries the scent of damp earth and old wood smoke, but beneath it lingers something else, something the locals refuse to name. The protagonist, a journalist, or perhaps a detective, or even a grieving relative searching for answers, arrives under the pretense of logic. They've come to investigate rumors, pilgrims vanishing on their way to a nearby chapel, travelers who swear they saw a church that wasn't there the day before, whispers of a place that only appears under a blood-red moon. The villagers are wary, their gazes shifting toward the distant fields, but never directly acknowledging them. When pressed, they speak in half-truths. "You won't find it unless it wants you to," an old woman mutters, her fingers clutching a rosary with no cross. The tavern keeper serves ale with a trembling hand and warns the outsider to leave before dusk. There are no children playing in the streets. No birds sing. Then, the first real clue, a tattered diary left behind by a missing scholar, its pages water-stained and frantic. The last entry describes a structure with smooth, unbroken walls, a place that breathes when you press your ear to the stone. The protagonist scoffs at first, attributing it to superstition or madness, until, just beyond the village outskirts, as the sun sinks below the horizon, the mist parts. This scene establishes folk horror with psychological unease, blending the slow-burn dread of the Wicker Man with the uncanny architecture of House of Leaves. The village operates like a passive cult, bound by fear rather than devotion, and the protagonist's skepticism is their only shield against the creeping truth. Some places exist to be consumed by, not understood. The knocking inside the church isn't just a sound, it's an invitation. And by the time the protagonist realizes that, it's already too late. The village doesn't have a name anymore. The roads leading to it are overgrown, as if the earth itself is trying to swallow any path in or out. The people who remain are not so much inhabitants as they are wardens, each family bound by an unspoken duty to stay, to watch, and to ensure no one disturbs the thing that sleeps beneath the field where the church appears. The protagonist's true motive. On the surface, they are a journalist chasing a sensational story, or a detective hired to find a missing person. But buried deeper is a personal connection they won't yet admit. They received a letter from one of the vanished, a university researcher who claimed to have uncovered proof of the divine before going silent. The letter ended with a single sentence: "God is real, and he is starving." They are searching for a lost sibling, last seen heading toward the village years ago. The case was closed, ruled a suicide, but the body was never found. They dream of the church before arriving. In the dreams, they hear a familiar voice calling from behind its walls. The villagers curse. The locals are not just afraid, they are complicit. Generations ago, their ancestors built the original chapel to contain something that had begun speaking to them in their prayers. But the thing outgrew its prison. Now, the village survives under a fragile pact. Once a year, under the harvest moon, a stranger must be led to the field where the church appears. If the thing inside accepts them, the village is spared. If not, the disappearances begin again. No villager ever speaks of what they've seen. Those who try are found the next morning with their tongues cut out, their hands folded in prayer. Every villager is born with a birthmark in the shape of a door. The mark fades if they ever leave the village for good. As the protagonist lingers in the tavern, they notice something wrong with the local priest, a man who never blinks, whose lips move slightly even when he isn't speaking. Later, They catch him standing perfectly still in the rain, staring at the empty field where the church will rise. When confronted, the priest whispers, "You hear it already, don't you?" The knocking. It sounds like your own heartbeat at first. And then, just before dawn, the protagonist wakes to the sound of scratching at their door, not from the hallway, from inside the walls. The researcher's fate. Their journal contains sketches of the church's interior, a place with inverted geometry, where the ceiling is a pit, and the pews are made of fused human bones. If the protagonist is a detective, the missing sibling's final message was, "Don't follow me. It's too late for me, but it's waiting for you." If the protagonist rolls up their sleeve, they might find they have the same mark as the villagers. Lean into decaying aristocracy. The village was once home to a noble family who first made the pact. Their manor still stands, its library filled with books bound in human skin. The church is not a building, but the exposed ribcage of a buried god. The knocking is its heartbeat. The thing inside the church is not evil. It's a forgotten saint, cursed to consume souls because no one remembers how to worship it properly. The night air is thick with the scent of damp soil and something older, buried iron, like the ghost of blood long soaked into the earth. The protagonist stands at the edge of the field, the village a dim cluster of flickering lanterns behind them. The villagers have barred their doors, though no one warned the outsider to do the same. There is only the silence, the mist, and the slow, creeping certainty that they are being watched, not by eyes, but by the land itself. Then, the moon breaks through the clouds, and the church is there. It wasn't a moment ago. There was no sound, no ripple in the air. It simply is, as if it has always stood in that empty field, waiting. The structure is wrong, not ruined, not crumbling, but unnervingly seamless. Its walls are smooth, pale stone, unmarked by time or touch. There are no doors, no windows, no cracks, no crosses. Just a single spire, too narrow, too sharp, like a bone piercing the sky. The protagonist's breath fogs in the air, though the night isn't cold. Their pulse thrums in their throat. They shouldn't approach. They know they shouldn't. But their feet move anyway, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. The grass beneath them crunches faintly, too dry for the damp air, as if the earth here is dead. When they press a hand to the wall, the stone is warm, alive. Not a random tapping, not the wind, a deliberate human rhythm. Shave and a haircut, a child's knock, a joke, a memory. The protagonist jerks back, but it's too late. The sound shifts. Now it's not a knock, it's a hand, dragging slowly down the other side of the wall, nails scraping stone. And then, so faint, they almost miss it. This is not a jump scare. It's a violation. The church is not a place. It's a predator. It doesn't just appear, it lures. The warmth of the walls suggests something breathing inside. The knock is personalized, a mimicry designed to unsettle. And the voice, whether it's the protagonist's lost sibling, a dead loved one, or their own future self, is the hook. The genius of the horror lies in what isn't shown. There's no monster, no ghoul, no slamming door. Just a structure that shouldn't exist, behaving in ways that defy logic and the dawning realization. It knows you. It's been waiting. The church is a living entity tied to the land, feeding on the village's silence and sacrifices. The horror comes from the protagonist's own mind unraveling. Why do they recognize the voice? Is the church supernatural, or is it a shared hallucination imposed on the village by guilt? The knock is in the same rhythm the protagonist's missing sibling used to use when playing as children. When they pull their hand away, their palm is stained with red dust. Not rust, but something flaked from the walls like dried blood. Later, they'll find a village child's drawing of the church, with a door, and the words, "It only opens from the inside." Dawn comes reluctantly to the village, as if the light fears what it might reveal. The protagonist stumbles back from the church, or tries to. Their legs are leaden, their thoughts thick with the voice that should not have known their name. Sleep is impossible. Every time they close their eyes, they hear the scrape of fingernails against stone, the whisper curling like smoke through their skull. They need answers. The village priest is gone. His quarters are unlocked, the bed neatly made, a half-drunk cup of tea still warm on the table. His Bible lies open to a page that has been meticulously blacked out, except for a single underlined passage. And the house, when it was built, was made without sound of hammer or axe, or any tool of iron. Beneath the bed, tucked in a box wrapped in yellowed cloth, is the real horror, the priest's private journals. The entries start with devotion, then descend into something darker. Day 47. The walls are singing today. The hymn is familiar, but I cannot place it. The children hear it too. They hum along, though they do not know the words. Day 112. I found the mechanism. It was not built by human hands. The stones shift when the moon is high. There is a pattern, a key. And finally, the last entry, scrawled in a hand so frantic the ink bleeds. It is not a church, it is a throat, and we are the meal. The protagonist follows the priest's notes to the edge of the village graveyard, where a single headstone juts crookedly from the earth. The names on the surrounding markers are worn smooth by time, but this one is fresh. The earth around it is disturbed. Number not disturbed. Breathing. A shallow rise and fall, as if something beneath the soil is sleeping. The protagonist digs. Their fingers strike wood, not a coffin, but a hatch, carved with symbols that mirror the ones from the priest's journal. The mechanism. When they pry it open, the stench that rises is not decay. It is incense and candle wax and something sweetly rotten like fruit left to ferment in the sun. A ladder leads down into darkness, and from below, a sound. The distant, echoing murmur of voices, chanting in unison. The horror of the scene. This is the moment the story shifts from eerie to uncanny. The church is not just alive, it is engineered. The priest's journals suggest a sentient architecture, a structure that learns the hymns, the names, the rituals. The hatch implies intent, not an accident, but a design. And the worst part? The protagonist recognizes one of the chanting voices. Like the ruins or annihilation, the horror lies in uncovering something that was never meant to be found. The priest's journals hint at a slow, insidious corruption, not by force, but by participation. The throat metaphor suggests the church is not just a place, but an organ of something larger. The symbols on the hatch match the birthmarks on the villagers. The chanting is in a language the protagonist doesn't know, but their mouth forms the words anyway. Later, they will find the priest inside the church, his body fused with the wall, his lips still moving in prayer. The ladder descends into a darkness so thick it feels like drowning. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth and something older, myrrh and wet stone, the metallic tang of blood long since dried but never truly gone. The protagonist's fingers slip on the rungs, their pulse a frantic drumbeat in their throat. Below, the chanting swells, a murmur of voices speaking in a language that twists in the air like smoke, syllables that shouldn't fit a human tongue, yet feel familiar. The chamber is not a crypt, it is an altar. The walls are lined with bones, not piled, not scattered, but arranged, woven into the architecture like mortar. Ribs form arches. Skulls stare from niches, their hollow eyes filled with candle stubs that burn with a light too blue, too cold. At the center of the room, a stone slab glistens darkly, its surface etched with the same symbols from the hatch. The chanting comes from the villagers, their faces hidden beneath hoods, their voices a discordant harmony. They are not alone. At the head of the slab stands a figure, tall, too tall, its limbs elongated, its face obscured by a mask of beaten gold. The mask has no features, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, unbroken metal that reflects the candlelight in wavering streaks. The protagonist steps back, but the earth moves beneath them. The ground is not dirt, it is flesh, pale, pulsing, threaded with veins of blackened roots. The moment their foot touches it, the chanting stops. Inside, the missing pilgrims are waiting. Not dead, not alive, suspended in the dark, their bodies fused with the stone, their mouths stretched in silent screams. Their eyes are open, their fingers twitch. One reaches out, skeletal and trembling, and the protagonist recognizes them, the researcher, the sibling, the face from their dreams. The figure lifts its hands. The ritual begins. This is not just a sacrifice, it is a consumption. The church is not a building, it is a living thing, and the villagers are not its worshippers. They are its farmers, tending a harvest of souls. The masked figure is neither priest nor monster, but something in between, a caretaker, a shepherd, a thing that has forgotten it was ever human. The true terror lies in the intimacy of the horror. The protagonist knows these faces. The church has been collecting them, and now it is hungry again. The ritual is ancient, cyclical, a perversion of faith twisted into something monstrous. The fusion of flesh and stone, the way the victims are preserved, not killed. The masked figure is not evil. It is simply performing its function, like a hand moving in puppet show shadows. The protagonist's birthmark burns during the ritual. It is not a mark of the village. It is a brand. One of the trapped mouths forms a word. Run. Later they will find the priest's journal again, this time in their own handwriting. The descent into the underground chamber is not a journey. It is an unraveling. Each rung of the ladder feels like a year slipping away, the air growing thicker with the scent of wet clay and something sweetly putrid, like flowers left to rot in holy water. The protagonist's breath comes in shallow gasps, their fingers numb against the cold iron. The chanting below is not a chorus of voices, but a single voice multiplied, echoing against itself in perfect, discordant harmony. It sounds like a funeral dirge sung by a congregation of throats that have forgotten how to scream. When their feet finally touch the ground, it gives slightly, not stone, not earth, but something porous and yielding, like the flesh of a gigantic dormant beast. The chamber is vast, its ceiling lost in shadow, its walls not built but grown, twisting arches of bone and petrified wood, fused together in impossible configurations. Between the ribs of the structure, patches of membrane pulse faintly, illuminated from within by a sickly bioluminescence. At the center, the altar is not a slab of stone, but a living thing, a tongue of glistening muscle, its surface studded with teeth-like protrusions that click and shift as the protagonist approaches. Around it, the villagers stand motionless, their hooded faces turned upward, their mouths slack. They are not chanting. The sound comes from their throats, but their lips do not move. The masked figure is waiting. It does not turn. It does not need to. The moment the protagonist steps forward, the mask splits down the middle, not opening, but peeling, the gold sloughing away like dead skin to reveal nothing beneath. No face, no void, just an absence that hurts to look at, a space where something has been carefully removed. Then the altar wakes. The surface parts like a wound, and the missing spill out, not falling, not crawling, but pouring forth in a tangle of limbs and whispering mouths. They are neither alive nor dead, but preserved in a state of perfect suffering, their bodies fused with the church's flesh, their eyes wide and unblinking. They speak, but not to the protagonist. They speak to the thing inside the altar. This is not a ritual of sacrifice, but of communion. The villagers are not offering victims, they are offering volunteers. The missing are not trapped. They are ascending, becoming part of something they believe to be holy. The true horror is not the act itself, but the realization that the protagonist is the only one who sees it as monstrous. The masked figure is not a priest, it is the first volunteer, and it is waiting for the protagonist to decide. The church is not a building, but an organism, its roots threaded through the village, its growth sustained by faith and flesh. The volunteers are not consumed, they are transformed, their humanity shed like a skin. The ritual is both grotesque and beautiful, a perverse inversion of the Eucharist where the worshippers become the body. The protagonist's birthmark is not a brand, but a seed. It has been growing. Soon it will bloom. The voices of the missing are not pleading, they are thanking. Later, the protagonist will find their own name etched into the altar, written in a hand they recognize as their own. The air in the chamber is thick with the scent of wet earth and burning wax, the kind of smell that clings to the back of the throat like a confession. The protagonist stands at the edge of the altar, their reflection warped in the gold of the faceless mask still hovering before them. The missing have all returned to the flesh of the church, their voices now a whisper in the walls, their bodies nothing more than shapes beneath the surface, pale, shifting things like drowned saints beneath ice. The masked figure extends a hand, not in offering, not in demand, but in invitation. The choice is not between life and death, it is between understanding and oblivion, because now the protagonist remembers. The dreams were not dreams. The voice that called their name was not a trick. They have been here before. They have always been here. The church does not take, it returns. The birthmark on their arm splits open, not a wound, a door, and beyond it, the truth. The church is not a prison, it is a cradle. The thing inside is not a monster, it is theirs. This is not a moment of defeat, but of revelation. The protagonist was never an investigator. They were a prodigal. The church is not a place, but a being, a child of something older, something that slept beneath the village long before the first stone was laid. The missing were not victims. They were midwives, tending a birth that never ends. The final choice is not whether to join them. It is whether to wake up. If the protagonist steps forward, they do not die. They remember. Their body unravels, not into nothingness, but into something vast and holy. The church sighs, the village exhales, the cycle begins again. If they run, they will wake in their bed, the taste of dirt and candle smoke on their tongue, the birthmark on their arm gone. But the knocking will follow them. And next time, they will not hesitate. The horror is not in the loss of self, but in the realization that the self was never real. The village was never a prison. It was a nursery. The truth is not a thing to be uncovered, but a state to be embraced. The protagonist's name was never their own. It was the church's first word. The journal they carried was never blank. They just couldn't see the writing yet. If they choose to leave, the first thing they will do upon waking is start writing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.